In the opening shots, we see the doctor inform Mrs. Larson that her husband does not have long to live. The doctor advises not to let her son see him because the patient is under the influence of strong painkillers, but the mother insists that the boy has the right to say goodbye to his father. Mr. Larson gives his son Hal some parting instructions. According to the man, the most important thing in life is to meet a beautiful woman with perfect appearance and vigor. Not realizing that his father says all this in delirium, Hal promises that he will fulfill his precepts. Many years have passed. Growing up, Hal hangs out at a nightclub, hoping to meet the most enchanting beauty, but all the girls turn him down, considering him not attractive and serious enough. His friend Mauricio, who has also always had problems with girls, is in the same situation. However, the friends do not admit to each other defeat on the personal front. Both claim that there are no women in the club worthy of them. Hal says he has to go because he wants to meet his girlfriend Jill, who is just returning from work. However, Jill was unaware that they were a couple. She said no to Hal's next proposal to go on a date. Hal tried to convince her to give him a chance. Besides, his promotion was due to be announced tomorrow. There would be parties and dinners and other events. However, Jill wasn't convinced. The next day, the big company where Hal works announced that they had decided to give the position to another employee. Hal was very upset. He complains about life to Gina and Artie, with whom he is friends. What upsets Hal the most is that Jill left him. In Gina and Artie's opinion, Jill is no match for Hal at all. In the 5 years that the couple have known him, he's been courting women who were too good for him. Besides, when choosing a mate, he has to think about more than just looks. One day Hal was riding in an elevator with a man he recognized as the famous guru Anthony Robbins. Suddenly the elevator stuck, and the men began to have a heart-to-heart talk. Hal confessed that he was having trouble with girls. He had been trying to find his ideal for years, but to no avail. Anthony was very surprised when he found out that for Hal, all that mattered was appearance, and that a woman's inner world meant nothing. He decided to give Hal a gift and hypnotized him by telling him that from now on, when he looked at a woman, he would only see her inner beauty. Out of the building, Hal caught a cab at the same time as the gorgeous blonde. Surprisingly, the girl agreed to get in the car with him. Deciding to try his luck, Hal complimented the beauty, causing the cab driver to be perplexed. The girl, whose name is Katrina, was very surprised by his courtesy.
I mean, you must be a model, right?
It turned out that the girl had come to this town because she needed to take care of her sick grandmother. Before Katrina left, she agreed to give Hal her phone number. When he got home, he was enthusiastic and invited Mauricio to a party. At the club, Hal told his friend about the hypnosis session in the elevator. At first Hal thought it was a joke, but tonight's encounter with the beautiful girl dispelled his doubts. Walt joins the guys. In spite of his severe spinal illness, he is not discouraged and is enjoying life. Mauricio is annoyed with Walt, so he leaves the table. Walt said he was celebrating today because he sold his company for a very large sum. He is now very rich. When Hal saw a beautiful girl named Bella, he immediately decided to meet her. It turned out that she and her friends were volunteering to help blind people. A few minutes later, Mauricio was horrified to see his friend dancing with 3 very ugly women. However, Hal saw slender beauties in their place. Mauricio tried to steal Hal away, but he didn't understand why the friend was acting so strangely. When Jill spotted her ex-boyfriend in the company of ugly women, it perplexed her. The next day while driving, Hal saw the most beautiful girl in his life on the street and decided to meet her by all means. Hal had no idea that the girl was actually very fat. She was choosing oversized lingerie, and Hal joked about it because such a slender beauty had no reason to buy knickers. She tried to ignore Hal, but he was insistent. The girl asked him to leave her alone, but Hal said he only wanted to get to know her and was ready to redeem himself. Rosemary agreed to have lunch with him at the cafe. It turns out that Rosemary volunteers at the hospital. She dreams of being enrolled in the Peace Corps, where volunteers help people all over the planet. Hal was amazed at how a girl could not only be beautiful, but also intelligent and kind. He was surprised when Rosemary ordered a lot of food. She said that no matter what she ate, her figure did not change, so she decided not to deny herself anything. At one point, a chair broke under Rosemary.
I'm a little embarrassed, but...
On the way out, the 2 guys joked that they were late because all the food in the cafe had already been eaten. Deciding that the guys were alluding to his being overweight, Hal went to deal with them. Rosemary thought he stood up for her and was very grateful. Hal went to walk the girl to a cab. When he asked for Rosemary's phone number and learned that her last name was Shanahan, he realized that she was the daughter of the head of their company. It seemed an incredible coincidence. Soon Hal decided to introduce the girl to Mauricio. He still could not believe his happiness because Rosemary was perfect both externally and internally. A beautiful girl named Lindy comes up to the guys. She has been trying to ask Mauricio out on a date for a long time, but he keeps refusing, citing the fact that the second toe on her foot is much longer than her big toe. Mauricio considers this a defect. Hal, for his part, considers his friend to be abnormal. When Mauricio saw Rosemary, he was shocked, for Hal had told him about the slender beauty. Later, Rosemary suggested that Hal meet her friends. She took him to the hospital, where the children were hospitalized, including the girl Catherine. Hal enjoyed playing with them, but they were interrupted by the evil, ugly nurse Tanya Pillar. Despite the outrage, Rosemary and Hal stayed, spending time with the sick children. Rosemary later expressed her admiration for Hal. Many people find it unpleasant to look at these children, but he interacted and played with them as if nothing had happened. In the evening, Hal invited Rosemary to his place, at which point they were seen by Jill, who looked confused. Rosemary refused to go to Hal's house, confessing that she had only had one boyfriend in her life. Hal couldn't believe it, thinking that Rosemary must have a lot of admirers. The girl is annoyed that Hal calls her beautiful and slender, because it's not true. Rosemary called it childish and left. The next day, Hal felt upset and complained to Mauricio. Rosemary had been his ideal, but now he might have lost her. Suddenly the doorbell rang. On the doorstep was Rosemary, who had come to apologize for yesterday. The couple spent the whole day together. Hal was amazed at Rosemary's appetite. There were many strange moments for which he could not find an explanation. When Rosemary jumped into the pool, a lot of water splashed out, and a boy was thrown into a tree. In the evening, Hal and Rosemary are going to visit her parents. It seems strange to Hal that Steve is Rosemary's father because they don't look anything alike. But Rosemary says that usually everyone claims otherwise. Hal met Mr. and Mrs. Shanahan. Over dinner, Hal shared with Steve his ideas for increasing the company's profits. Steve was impressed with these ideas and asked him to speak at the administrative council meeting. Also, Steve says that Hal no longer has to pretend to like Rosemary. Steve loves his daughter very much, but she is not destined to win first place in another beauty pageant. Hal is perplexed by this. In his opinion, Steve is obsessed with his reputation. Rosemary is a beautiful person who, because of her parents, has built up a lot of complexes. In the evening, Hal and Rosemary were finally alone. Rosemary was very shy, but she felt most beautiful and desirable next to her beloved. The morning after Rosemary left, Jill spotted her. She immediately knocked on Hal's door and invited him to visit her tonight, but he refused. After Hal spoke at the administrative board, everyone applauded him. Steve called him into his office and apologized for what he had said at the dinner last night. He also told Hal about the promotion. Gina and Artie rushed to congratulate Hal in person and caught the couple in love. When Rosemary left, they accused him of being unscrupulous. They are sure that Hal was only dating Rosemary for his career. Later, Hal went to the gym with the friend. Hal doesn't understand why those around him, including Mauricio, think Rosemary is ugly. In Hal's opinion, Mauricio is just afraid of girls because of his complexes, and Lindy's case showed that clearly. When Mauricio stated that Hal only wanted Rosemary for a promotion, he got angry and left. It turned out that Rosemary and Walt had known each other for a long time. He also volunteers at the children's hospital. Walt introduced his friends to his new girlfriend, that nurse Tanya Pillar. In fact, Tanya was very beautiful, not the way Hal saw her. She started having an affair with Walt only because he is rich. Tanya dreams of traveling and spending money on shopping. In the evening, the friends were partying at a bar. Suddenly, Rosemary was called out by a handsome guy named Ralph, who had come with his friend Leeboy. Both guys are also volunteers. Rosemary later admits to Hal that Ralph is her ex-boyfriend. Meanwhile, Mauricio was able to find Anthony Robbins. He spoke briefly about what was going on with Hal. Robbins remains convinced that he has done a good thing. All people are subject to the stereotypes that television imposes on them and are incapable of noticing true beauty. Mauricio had to lie that Hal was on the verge of losing his job. Then Robbins agreed to tell him how to remove the hypnosis. At dinner at a restaurant, Rosemary said she wanted to go with the volunteers to another country in 10 days. There are a lot of people there who need help. Hal was very upset by the news. He thinks that Rosemary is going because of Ralph. Suddenly, Rosemary broke a chair again. Hal went to the manager to settle the misunderstanding. Suddenly, Mauricio called him and cast a spell.
Shallow Hal wants a gal.
Now Hal will see people as they are again. But as soon as Mauricio learned that his friend was in the restaurant with Rosemary, he began desperately urging him not to look at her. Thinking Mauricio was out of his mind, Hal was about to go back to their table, but he saw a very fat girl instead of Rosemary. He asked the manager why they had been moved to another table. The manager, who turned out to be a man dressed as a woman, didn't understand what Hal meant. Before Hal could approach Rosemary, Mauricio had taken him away and told everything. Hal didn't believe him, but then Katrina, whom he'd met earlier in the cab, called out to him. She looked different now, too. Since Hal hadn't told Mauricio about Katrina, he realized that his friend was telling the truth. At home, Hal became indignant. He thought it would be better to leave things as they were. He had fallen in love with Rosemary and saw her as the most beautiful, and he didn't care what anyone else thought. When Mauricio realized that he had let his friend down, he suggested that he seek Robbins out and have another hypnosis session. Suddenly Rosemary knocked on the door. If he saw Rosemary as she was now, no amount of hypnosis would help him. So Hal lied that he had conjunctivitis. A few days later, Steve came to Hal, concerned that Rosemary hadn't been able to reach him for the past 2 days. Hal assured that everything was fine, he just had a lot of work to do. Finding Anthony Robbins was not easy. Hal is depressed because he doesn't want to lose his beloved. In the evening, Rosemary called him and asked what was going on between them. At some point, Hal suddenly started avoiding her. That same evening, Jill stopped by Hal's house and invited him to go to a restaurant as a friend. He wondered why the girl had suddenly changed her attitude toward him. Jill said she was wrong about him. Meanwhile, the Shanahan family came to the same restaurant. Rosemary saw her lover with another girl. Jill admitted to Hal that she thought he was superficial. He gave the impression of a guy who only cared about appearances in women. But when Jill saw the girls he'd been dating lately, she realized that looks meant nothing to him. Hal still loves Rosemary, so he told Jill that they couldn't be together. He crossed paths with Rosemary in the hallway, but didn't recognize her. She couldn't hold back her tears and went outside to calm down. At that moment, Hal called her and asked her to meet. Rosemary hung up the phone, not understanding anything. 5 days passed. Steve told Hal to leave his daughter alone and not to call her again. Besides, Rosemary is about to go to another country as part of the Peace Corps. Steve doesn't understand how he could believe Hal's hypocrisy. Now his daughter has renewed a relationship with Ralph, who loves her. Hal arrived at the hospital, hoping to find Rosemary here. He heard from Walt that she had already left. Suddenly a girl called out to Hal. He didn't recognize her at first, but then realized it was Catherine, who was hospitalized in the children's burn unit with the other children. On the street, Hal was caught up by Mauricio, who decided to reveal his deepest secret. It turns out that he has a birth defect, a rudimentary tail. All his life Mauricio has been hiding it from everyone. Upon seeing the tail, Hal was shocked. But he is sure that there will be a woman who will love Mauricio just the way he is. Mauricio brought Hal to the Peace Corps office. Here they met Lee Boy, who was not at all handsome, and neither was Ralph. From him, by the way, Hal learned that he and Rosemary were not a couple. Rosemary's departure party is being held at the Shanahan family home today. The company hurried there. When Hal entered the house and saw the fat woman, he kissed her, thinking it was Rosemary. Mrs. Shanahan stopped them. It turned out to be not Rosemary, but the housekeeper. Mrs. Shanahan agreed to let Hal talk to her daughter. Hal saw Rosemary for the first time as she was. He told her he loved her and apologized for everything. She was his only love. Even though Rosemary was very hurt, she forgave Hal. But there is one problem. She is leaving today for 14 months. Hal has announced that he will go with her. He is now officially accepted into the Peace Corps. Now the lovers will be together forever. All the friends and family are very happy for them. After seeing his friend off, Mauricio meets a sweet girl who loves puppies very much.